All right. How's everybody doing? You ready to learn about case management? Yeah? All right. So thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. You may remember me earlier. I was on the keynote panel. Since then, though, I have definitely changed a little bit. I decided it's time to put on my official Dev Day uniform. So I've got my Dev Day shirt, obviously, and comfortable shoes. However, I've been told that I am only allowed to walk within this block, so you won't be seeing me using my athletic shoes very well right now. Today we're taking a technical deep dive of Case Management Studio. This is not marketing content. This is going to be highly technical, in the weeds. I'm not going to get mad. This is your last chance to run away now while you can. If this does not seem interesting to you, we are going to be going all the way from UI to data layer, talking about what's happening with common features in Case Management Studio. All right, so did any of you actually get an opportunity to do the test drive? It was just before this. Did anybody do the Case Management Studio test drive? Okay, we got one. So he's actually going to come up and teach this for me. I'm going to walk off now, right? No, so I'm going to give a really quick high-level overview if this is your first introduction, and then we'll get into the weeds a little bit after that. So we're actually going to kind of start on the history of this a little bit. If you've been around Appian long enough, I can guarantee that you have built some flavor of case management, right? Something with a core case, request, ticket, or issue, with a number of tasks that need to be completed by a number of users in order to close that out. Now raise your hand. How many people have built some flavor of this? Yep. Okay, it's pretty common, I know. There's a reason for this, right? Appian's native tasking and process capabilities, as well as low-code flexibility, actually make it a really powerful tool for case management use cases. However, we saw after over a decade of doing this over and over and over and over again, we're like, we should probably do something about this, right? We keep seeing this thing come up over and over again. We probably should build a solution for this. Well, last year, we had the first iteration of the case management solution that came out. Since then, we've actually put a ton of investment into new front-end capabilities that we'll talk about today. And that's actually where Case Management Studio comes in. What this allows you to do is it enables the business user to have more power from the front end, enabling you guys, the developers, to focus on the high value, high skill, high customization work. So on March 1st of this year, Case Management Studio came out. It offers the ability to configure workflows on the front end. Business users can go into Studio and create workflows with a number of different tasks strung together. These will be then exposed to workers, case workers, in the workspace site. We'll discuss all of these in a few details shortly. First, though, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page with terminology, because I have seen just in all of the pre-sales work we've done around this that we all call these things different things, right? Request, issue, task. What are all these things that we're talking about? We're going to start with the case type, all right? So this is the actual workflow, right? As well as the associated metadata associated with it. So think about new hire onboarding as a case type. Then we have the case. So this is one instance of actually executing that case type, right? So think about new hire onboarding for John Smith. And then we have a task. So this is the discrete piece of work that needs to be completed by a particular user or group. Think about assigning a unique employee ID. All right, now we're on the same page. Hopefully you guys have a really high-level understanding of what this thing is and what it does and the value it provides. We're going to go into some tech. All right, so here's the high-level studio architecture. We're going to be talking about this, all of the kind of common features in a very similar way. First, we're going to start at the UI layer, where the user is actually interfacing with Case Management Studio. Then we're going to go into the application layer, which has all of the beautiful sale objects that you guys are all experts at implementing. And then finally, we're going to go to the heart of the operation, which is the data layer. Like I said, we're going to decompose these common actions that are going to be taken within Studio, just so you guys can understand what's actually happening under the hood. All right, so starting with the UI layer. First we have, you guessed it, Studio. As the name implies, this is where you're actually architecting the workflows. Next, we have the workspace, which is where caseworkers actually take action and execute those workflows. Then we have the report builder, which is where users can configure and expose reports. We have the Solutions Hub, where the site configurations are made, such as branding, logos, colors, etc. And also there's an optional workspace portal. And this is really useful if you have any unauthenticated use cases. Now, note, these are just kind of some of the things that come out of the box, but if you're using additional add-on modules or you're creating your own custom sites, obviously you're going to have many, many more of these. Now, onto the application layer. As I mentioned before, this is all the beautiful sail that you guys are all experts at writing. First, we have the Studio base. So this is going to be all your rules, processes, interfaces that are going to be pertinent to the actual orchestration of all of these workflows. Then we have the modules. So these are optional free power add-on modules that can add additional capabilities kind of for free within Studio if you choose to include them or not. Last, we have the customization layer. So this includes any objects that were created from the front-end configuration, as well as any customizations that you guys have created. So that can include custom interfaces, custom processes, new add-on modules, which we'd really like to see a lot of people creating those if we could. The app market might be a great place for you guys to upload some add-on modules after you get a chance to get your hands on this thing. So now on to the core of any application. We have the data layer. We're going to speak to the data model in a lot of depth shortly, but at a very high level, Studio comes with a number of core tables. These are overlaid by synced records. You can bring any database that is Appian supported in order to do this. The model includes adding new records, adding new fields. As long as you're able to actually relate those records effectively, you can really extend the data model as much as you'd like. And like I said, more detail on that shortly. This is all just still predicated on your ability to use data fabric and synced records, so make sure that you plan whether or not this is a good fit beforehand. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to start talking about some common actions and what's actually happening when you execute them. So when you create a case in Case Management Studio, what you're doing is you're having a caseworker actually come in, fill out the pertinent details of the case. So it could be the name, the description, and they have the capability there to actually add in any of the related nouns of your organization. So again, in our new hire onboarding use case, it could be selecting the employee, right? That's probably going to be sourced from an external system. What's actually happening at the application layer, though? So you can see the process model here. Your all favorite things here, process models, right? It writes the data and the associated metadata. A rule is set up to determine which tasks should be launched. Audits are automatically generated. Comments and documents are updated. Milestones and statuses are updated appropriately, and notifications are sent. I want a show of hands on this one. Who has built some flavor of this process model before? I see a good number of hands. Yep. I've built this like 100 times, and I'm really happy that I already have like a great starting point instead with Case Management Studio, right? Because this is a developer audience, I would be remiss if I didn't actually talk about a couple common customizations. First and foremost, the forms that get displayed to the users, right? So when you're actually submitting that case, the form is going to be a common customization point. You may want to add, again, additional data elements. You may want to add some complex capabilities in there. There are some front-end Studio features, and so we'll get into this in a little bit more detail in a bit on how the kind of front-end features interlay with the work that you all would be doing as low-code designers. Also, you may want to update your record summaries. You may want to update your task inputs. You may want to update kind of anything across the board, including the homepage. All right. Here's a very high-level, kind of simplified look at our data layer. We're going to go ahead and narrow in on what is pertinent to this particular use case of creating a case. And you'll see that here. At the heart of it, we have our case, which can have many tasks. Both cases and tasks have their own event histories. Automatically, out of the box, all the basic CRUD operations are going to be captured in these event histories, right? So creation, completion, all of these things, as well as a number of other common actions such as adding watchers, adding tags, updating assignment. You'll also have milestone tracking at the task level, which will be updated based on the completion of particular tasks. Both documents and comments can be stored at the case or the task level. And we also have the concept of a role, which stores information about the creator, the submitter, the completer, whoever the person is involved with this process. All right. So we've seen how a case gets generated and how that all works. We're going to talk about how you actually configure the workflow that was just executed. So we're going to start here with Case Management Studio case types. When you actually create a case type, there are a number of great features that you can implement here. We're going to focus on the workflow for now, but I do want to just highlight some of these, and we will get into some more detail on a handful of them in a little bit. Of course, you can set the high-level details, right? So you can set things like the title, the description, the priority for this particular case type. You can actually modify the data elements associated with this case type. You can use those data elements to create an intake form as well as a summary page, and you can configure the workflow. Like I said, that's going to be where we're focused on first. So the first thing that you're going to do is create a case category. So let's say I have a number of case types that are associated with HR. I may create, shockingly, an HR category. From there, I'm going to go ahead and create a case type. And then I'm going to configure the workflow. This is where you're going to string together all of your tasks, which can run sequentially or in parallel. You can set SLAs and milestones, and you can update assignments there. And you can see we have this fancy visualizer on the right so that you can see everything in real time. Now, a pretty important aspect to this is actually tasks, right? You kind of need to have the tasks configured in order to properly create a workflow with them. Out of the box, you get 3 different task behavior types. You can get a confirmation, which as it implies, somebody's confirming that they completed a step, whether in another system, in Appian, or manually in person. You have a document upload, so the completion of that task is contingent on one or multiple documents being uploaded. And then you have a decision. What this does is it actually provides a prompt to the user as well as a number of options that they can select from in order to complete that task. This is going to be very common in a review step, for example. So are you going to approve or are you going to deny this particular request? If you go either direction, it's going to branch down a different path. You can also set up something called a task block. So think of a task block like a sub-process. It essentially allows you to kind of pre-configure multiple tasks together. So when it comes time to create your workflows, you already have these created and you just drop them in where necessary, right? So if you have like a very common process within your organization that you expect to see in many places, that's where you would use task blocks. All right, so at the app layer, what's happening here? Obviously, a process model is kicking off, writing all of the associated data for the category, the type, the task data, all that good stuff. All of the dependencies are being set. There's not some massive, scary recursion rule happening in the background to figure out what's next in the process. You also see that we have this, again, fancy workflow visualizer that I mentioned earlier. This is going to be a custom component plugin that does a network chart field. So again, that's updating in real time as you're actually updating the data behind it. One of the most common customizations I expect to see here is actually in that task behavior type that I mentioned. I said, we have the 3 out of the box. We have confirmation, we have doc upload, we have decision. There might be an instance where you might want all 3, for example. So you'd create a custom task type behavior, and it'll allow you to actually do all 3. Or maybe you want an automated task that allows you to complete that task upon hitting a specific integration, sending a notification, pushing data downstream, whatever it may be. And you would just go ahead and add that to the task type table, or excuse me, the task behavior type table, and then you'd make sure that that's properly configured within your interface or your process model to have that behavior upon the existence of that ID. All right, so to the data layer as always. If we look at the data model, we can see the config and reference tables that I mentioned earlier. At the heart, we have the case type table. Next is the workflow task. So this actually holds all of the configurable information from that workflow. So that includes the SLAs, the assignments. It could include the milestone associated with that particular task. This relates to the reference task. So this is the unique and discrete set of tasks that you have available. Each of those has a related task behavior type, for example. On the right side, you'll see we have that workflow task branch and task response option. Those are really required for the decision tables to allow you to branch effectively based on those options being selected. And as I said, very common customization will be right here with that task behavior type. I expect you guys to be making a lot of additions here based on your unique customer use cases. All right, we're going to talk about the data model because a case is meaningless without data. All right, so there's a couple different ways to extend the data model in Case Management Studio. The first is through related entities. These are the nouns of your organization. So I want you to think about like customer, asset, employee. Then we've got case data. So this is the transactional data that's going to be specific to each case that gets executed. Lastly, you can just go ahead and add to the existing tables that come with it, right? So you can go ahead and extend the case table if you want to. This is really useful if there is data that's going to be pertinent to every single case, regardless of the case type. Particularly if it is going to be system-generated data. So for example, out of the box, we have an SLA in days that gets captured, right? Maybe I actually want to capture that in hours, minutes, whatever it might be, depending on your use case. For now, we're actually going to go ahead and focus on the first two, because these are going to probably be very common use cases for you all. All right, so with related entities, again, the nouns of your company, out of the box, Studio comes with a person entity. Additional entity types can be added to your model and exposed to users when they create cases. So what's happening at the app layer here? Well, you should have a record for all of your respective nouns. It's very likely that you're actually bringing these with you, right? You already have them within your Appian instance. Or you could be creating new ones for the first time based on this use case. When a user is creating or working on a case, they then would have the ability to select from those entities as it relates to that particular case type, right? So in that new hire onboarding use case, I have the employee that I would be then selecting. I can also have multiple entity types that I'm associating with it, right? So maybe it's not just employee, but it could be the office, right? The office that they work at. What we're gonna do there is use synced record relationships really effectively to actually correlate all of that data together so that it can be read and written very seamlessly. And of course, because we're talking about this now, common customization would be to continue adding to these things, right? Adding new relationships, adding new entities, creating some mapping tables between them. Again, here's our kind of high level, and we're gonna focus in on this right side here with the case entity map and entity. So you see that, in this particular instance, we have a many-to relationship between case and entity. So we do have this intermediary mapping table. If you do have a one-to-one for whatever reason, you can kind of skip this intermediary step, but really the important bit here is that you actually relate the data effectively with synced records. Now, the second way that I mentioned was through case data. So this is gonna be your transactional data. What's really cool about this is that, this is pretty new and unique to any of the apps that we've built, right? Because we haven't really allowed front-end configuration like this before. So we're gonna talk about that in some more detail in a second, but I find this a really exciting piece. At the highest level here, we kind of have our all case data, right? So this is gonna be the data that's actually relevant as it implies to all cases. The names are very, very good here. Then we have our case category data. So for example, if I have an HR category, I probably will have employee data that's relevant to every single case type. Then we have our case type data. So this is gonna be very specific data based on the case type that's being executed. To the right, again, we have a nice data visualization tool that shows you the hierarchy of that data and all of its fields. All right, so at the application layer, again, the reason why I was excited is, no, we are not just storing a list of fields in the database and then dynamically showing stuff on the front end, dynamically saving stuff with massive a-big match rules and if-else's and all these things, right? We're actually creating objects here, right? We're actually generating records with the fields that you just defined. And what's really cool is that when a user goes in and modifies data, kicks off a case, it's going to go ahead and instantiate a row in all three of those tables that I just mentioned, and it will allow the user to then go ahead and enter that information in the intake form, view that information in the record summary, right? These are all really powerful front-end tools that are now at the disposal of our end users. What's also great about it, like I mentioned earlier, is because your business user can now focus on these things, you can focus on all the high-value, high-code work, such as setting up the integrations instead of worrying about some basic data elements on a form, right? One common customization we expect to see here is adding one-to-many data. Because everything I just discussed is one-to-one relationship, we expect that one-to-many will be needed, and as long as you can use synced record relationships, you can do that really easily by adding it to the case relationship. All right, so we're gonna narrow in right here at these three tables. So we have one-to-one to one-to-one, right? So case to all case, to case category, to case type related data. Like I said before, if you need to actually extend the data model to add new things, you can go ahead and just relate that right up to case, no big deal, it'll just write through those relationships. All right, this is a segue into another exciting feature, and that is actually creating an interface in Case Management Studio. So from the front end, a business user will be able to use a drag and drop interface builder, right? So we talked about the configurable case data just a second ago. What's really cool about this is all of those fields are now available for selection when creating this interface. So not only are you actually creating stuff on the front end for the data, now you can actually include that data in your intake form. Therefore, it gets exposed to the users, they fill it out, and it's actually storing it into the appropriate record fields, right? It's not just into some key value pair database like we used to have to always do when we were creating dynamic interfaces. So one thing that's also important to note is this drag and drop interface builder is not just, again, creating the key value pairs and you have to have some really complicated dynamic interface that doesn't scale well. It's actually generating the sail interfaces, those sail objects. The first thing that it's going to create is that intake form itself. The second thing that it's going to create is a number of wrappers so that it can effectively show that interface to the user based on what you're doing, right? So it could be the intake form, it could be the case record summary, wherever. But essentially what it's going to do is a bang match and say, okay, based on this case type, we're going to go ahead and show this particular interface that the user configured. Now, again, common customization would be adding more to this interface, right? We have a set of components that are configurable in the drag and drop interface, but we know our customers have really complicated needs. We know that even within /design, the drag and drop doesn't always do what we need it to do, right? So what you will do instead is you go into the back end once that interface is created, add in all your fancy UI stuff, right? It could be hitting custom integrations, it could be grids, it could be heavily dynamic displays or validations. You'd go ahead and add those in all in the back end, and then of course when the user goes to create a case, all of that will be available to them. Now you may be asking, okay, but what happens if I do that and then I go back into that Studio drag and drop builder? Like, is it gonna be a pink box? Is it gonna be a nightmare? Is it all gonna break? Am I gonna crash Appian? No, it's just gonna be grayed out. It's just gonna essentially look like it's just kind of an immobile piece of the form, and you can continue on your way. All right. So there's not a whole lot going on at the data layer here. It's mostly just storing the interface UUIDs at the case type level. So we do have some add-on modules. A lot of these highlight some really cool new AI capabilities, which is really exciting. The one that I've shown here is the ability to summarize documents with AI, so that's a really cool new one. Like I said, these are all optional. You can decide to configure them or not based on the need of your use case. We expect a lot of these to just be continual. This is going to be a growing list, right? We're going to just keep adding to this. It's all free power. One thing, though, my big request from everybody in this room, the developers, right, is that we see a bunch of new add-on modules created by folks like you in the app market. If you create something super useful, not only do you get a bunch of Appian street cred, but if it's useful to somebody on a project, they owe you a beer. That's the rule. All right? All right, a few other important features. I'm going to talk about the Solutions Hub. This is just a really easy front-end configuration tool for adding branding, colors, changing some of the UI components on the front end so that you can kind of make it look and feel the way that you want for your organization. We have the translation set, which are an exciting new capability. Looking at Rachel Rader in the back right there, I think we can have her to thank for this. So the translation set object allows you not only to internationalize all your applications, but probably more within the context of Case Management Studio, it also allows you to kind of update the vernacular that your organization is used to, right? So if for whatever reason they don't like case as a term, I can just go into my translation sets and go from case to request, right? And that way I don't need to go into every interface and make 1,000 tiny little modifications everywhere it's referenced. I do have to give a specific shout out to this module. This is the report builder. Is Geraldine still here? No, okay. And then let's talk about key takeaways. All right, so now that you guys know a little bit more, I want a new show of hands. How many people have actually built something really similar to this before? All right, yeah, it's not so, that's a big thing, is I want you guys to take away, it's not so scary, it's not so new and different from stuff you've probably already created before. It's just very seamlessly put together, provides a ton of front-end power, and has a lot of these add-on modules, right? It just prevents you from having to rebuild the same stuff over and over and over again. The modular architecture is also really great because it makes it really easy to maintain, customize, and extend. These front-end configuration tools obviously are a game changer. We haven't had anything like this before where you can actually create new objects from the front end. This is a delighter for business users, right? They feel really in power and control, and like they have the ability to kind of update their workflows on their own. And also it allows you to focus on the high-value, high-code work. Last but not least, just kind of keep this in mind as you're looking at new use cases, right? This could actually benefit your current project or a future project. Now, I'm going to have to call out some of the sessions that we have. So after this, like I said, you might actually be able to get into the final test drive that's after this session. I think it's limited availability, but you may be able to squeeze in. Otherwise, tomorrow, we have a number of sessions about Case Management Studio. You can consider today like your 101 theory course. I think probably most relevant to you would be the Customizing Case Management Studio, which is going to be like your 201 Applying Case Management Studio. So I'd really highly recommend that one. Again, Rachel in the back will be presenting that one. Last but not least, thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate it. Please give feedback, mostly about my cracked voice and how I should have a lot of cough drops before I do this. Also, I know that you've heard this probably 10 times already and everything, but please go to community.appian.com/learn to get more information. Please fill out the survey. We're always taking feedback. Please be kind. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.